It seems that fast Fords can do no wrong. Sierra Cosworths are now worth more than my first house, and the Focus RS is already considered a national treasure. But then there's the odd one out, a fast Ford that has missed out on all the fanfare. Original reviews were okay but not glowing, and some even dared criticise it. This is the Mk1 Focus ST. It doesn't have the cult status of the RS or the legend of the Cosy, but stick around because I think this is still going to be a very smart buy. The 90s was a time of complete transformation for Ford. It had previously been making cars which were unexciting and dull, just being sold on convenience and price. And suddenly the Mondeo, the Car and the Puma came out, showing that Ford could make even ordinary cars drive brilliantly. And then came the Focus in 1998, and suddenly the class leader was no longer the Golf. The mighty Volkswagen had been dethroned. The Focus was sharper, more agile and simply more fun. With 128 horsepower, 2-litre Zetec as the range topper though, the one thing that it lacked was a performance version, and that took 4 years to arrive. With such a good base car to start from, the ST should have been a slam dunk. Instead, when it was released in 2002, it got a lukewarm reception. Why is that? Well, because at the same time, Honda had just dropped the Civic Type R with 200 horsepower, and this had 170. Bit like turning up to a gunfight with a butter knife. The relatively tame power figures made sense when the full-fat RS was released just 2 years later with 212 horsepower. That took all the glory, but bear with me, because in many ways, this might be a better choice. It didn't just have a warmed over Zetec, Ford gave it a proper makeover. It had variable valve timing, albeit a one-sided, more gentle version of Honda's VTEC, lightweight forged pistons, and a different head with bigger valves, also a freer flowing exhaust. The result? 171 horsepower for a 0 to 60 of 7.9 seconds and an engine that loved to rev. Not outrageously quick, but fast enough. Springs, dampers and anti-roll bars were all uprated, and it even had specially made bushers to keep things tight. Behind the chunky 17-inch wheels, which by the way were pretty huge for the time, sat bigger discs with stronger calipers. Other exterior changes were small, reshaped front and rear bumpers, badging, and that's pretty much it. Although this car has the optional rear wing, which I think really sets it off. They were also available as practical estates, although I have to say that, personally at least, I'm not a huge fan of the way that those look. A speed-sensitive, quick steering rack sharpened things up, and that was topped off with the 6-speed Gertrag gearbox, something that was quite rare for a car in this class at this point in time. Inside, there's a leather wheel, white dials, drilled aluminium pedals, but most significant of all, these lovely Recaro seats. On paper, it ticked every box, but the Civic Type R stole the headlines, the RS took the glory, and this was left a little bit like an unwanted middle child. I'm not sure we got that completely right though. Let's find out. I have to say that I'm not the biggest fan of Ford's sort of new age design of this era. When this car first came out, I really didn't like the way they looked. I mean, I wouldn't have said they were ugly, but to me, it kind of didn't feel this new edge thing with the straight lines, but then the sort of soft curves. I don't know, never quite fitted in properly, but I have to say that over time, they've actually aged really well, these cars. And although I still don't think it's the absolute prettiest thing out there, it actually looks a lot better now than it did then. The same story with the interior, which has all these crisscrossing lines with sharp edges and then rounded corners moulded in. And at the time, I didn't know why they would do something like that. There's just no symmetry to it in my eyes. And again, looking now, just hasn't aged that badly. But straight away, I have to tell you, the first thing that really shocks me about this is how compliant that ride is at low speeds. It's almost got like an oily feel to it. It's controlled, there's stiffness in there, but I don't know, there's a softness with the way it deals with the undulations, which totally unexpected. I mean, it shouldn't be unexpected because Fords in this era, their chassis people, I think, was it Rupert Parry-Jones? Just magicians at what they did. One of the other big differences that you'll notice straight away is with the standard Focuses. One of the biggest bugbears I ever had, well, maybe the only bugbear to be honest, is that you feel like you're sitting on top of it rather than in the car. The Recaros, maybe they're obviously shaped differently. You feel more like you're inside it looking out, so it feels like a more involved driving position straight off. One of the main things that people didn't like about it at the time was just that it was lacking in power, I suppose, but I'm curious to see how the engine feels in terms of character and if it still feels slow today. So let's see what it's like through the gears. If you came from a modern hot hatch, you'd probably be a bit disappointed with the amount of shove it has. It's also quite a revvy engine, but does have a bit of torque low down as well. It's not too bad. Where it really shines though, this car, is with the chassis and the way it turns and goes. Even the standard cars were good, but this has one of those rare chassis where it just all works together. It all feels right. Despite the fact that the low-speed ride has that sort of oily, sort of polished quality to it, when you're going for it, it's still very controlled. There's not much lean, very keen to turn as well. I'm going to go back to the engine because I think that's an area that also I'm not fully happy with. It's okay, it's revvy, it's quite sharp, it's a bit buzzy up top though, and it doesn't make a noise which is particularly addictive or rewarding if you do rev it. So, I don't know, a little bit lacking in character perhaps, but don't let that turn you off because this has so much to offer on our British roads. I believe that it was actually mainly, although it was designed in conjunction with Ford in the US, the main work was really done here in the UK, and you can tell because it works so well on our roads. Although it had bigger discs, they don't look large by today's standards, but braking is excellent. You've got enough travel on the pedal to make it easy to modulate. It's not overly soft, it's quite progressive. Let's see what it's like on the S-bend. Yeah, I'm forced to agree that the power plant just doesn't live up to the chassis. The chassis is just so much better than the 170 horsepower can offer. To get the best out of it, you definitely have to switch traction control off. It's not a really intrusive system. It doesn't completely cut the engine out, but it will cut in at relatively low cornering speeds and just stop you using the throttle to try and power it out as effectively as it can. Let's give it one more chance. We'll take it through the gears and see how it does. It's in quite a weird middle zone, this engine, because it's lacking the charisma needed, I think, that you'd get with better sound. It's happy to rev up, but it's quite buzzy at the top, so that alone doesn't encourage you to want to thrash it, although it is really happy to rev. And Although Ford said that 85% of the torque, I think, was available from 2,500 revs, although it's perfectly easy to drive, it doesn't feel like it's quite that torquey to me. Something else which is supposed to be a bit of a failure for these, for some people it's the worst thing, is the gearbox. I can't see that. It's not a highlight for sure. It's not as good as the Civic's sort of precision snickety-snick box was, but it works fine. It's got the right amount of travel on it. It's maybe just a little bit lacking in precision, but it's not a bad gearbox to use. Oh, that is just awesome. The harder you drive it and the better it gets. The chassis is so well balanced between front and back. Coming out of that left-hander there, it just did a little, very slight four-wheel drift, which felt beautiful. And steering is just so feelsome, so precise. Maybe for me, it's a tiny bit on the light side, but that just goes on to make the car feel even more agile. So I agree that the engine isn't really an equal to the chassis. That doesn't make it a bad car though. Now, it was only made for 2 years, between 2002 and 2004, so there's not loads of them about. I don't think official production figures are available, but it's something along the lines of about 15,000 made, so they're relatively rare cars. And yet, they're still really affordable. Prices start around 2,000, but that'll be something very leggy. They tend to suffer from rust, so almost certainly will be quite holed up. So I think to get a good one, a starting price is around, you know, for 5,000 or 6,000, you can get a good car, and this is a massive amount of car for that money. Don't forget, it has the extra cachet that it was the first fast Focus. The RS as well, although it's a much more Banzai proposition and has a bit more motorsport heritage, I suppose, it's a bit more of a special thing in some ways. It's also not a car that's really that usable every day. And although it is more exciting than this to drive, it's also, I always found it was a bit of a torque steering monster. In some ways, this is a bit more of a pure driving experience, and certainly a car which would be much easier to drive day to day. Not to mention the price. When you consider you can get this for an eighth of the price, you can see just what an incredible bargain the ST is. So to sum up my feelings on the ST, yes, I agree it's not perfect, and to me the main issue is the engine. It's not so much the lack of power, and yes, it is lacking a little bit. It's more just the fact that it's lacking involvement and charisma. Despite that though, you get one of the best chassis surely in this class, and the fact that they are so approachable financially really makes them brilliant cars to buy now. As a fun daily, I think you really couldn't go wrong. Massive thanks to Mick who brought this down today. And also, if you enjoyed this, I think you need to check and see how far Ford has come from the past. There's a review that I did on the proper old style Escort, the RS 1600. Now that was an absolute no compromise car, still fun in its own way, but completely lacking the chassis sophistication which Ford had later on. Do take a look if you're interested in that. Thank you so much for watching, and see you for the next video.